As we've been discussing this Sunday morning, the House of Commons returns on Monday. And the question of whether or not that back and forth will form the narrative is one the Sunday strategy session is here to dig into. With me this morning, former NDP strategist and director of communications to the late Jack Layton, Kathleen Monk. Corey Teneycke, Ontario Premier Doug Ford's campaign manager and former director of communications for the Prime Minister's office under Stephen Harper, is here as well, as is Scott Reid, a CTV News political analyst and former communications director to Prime Minister Paul Martin. Hi, everybody. Good to see you. Really appreciate you making the time. Kathleen, is that back and forth that we just heard between the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition, Pierre Poilievre, do you anticipate, does that form like the nexus of the next few months here in the House?
And certainly the nexus of what's going to happen this coming week in terms of what's happening in the House. We'll see, one version of Mr. Positive, Mr. Optimist, that being the Prime Minister, who's trying to kind of feel people's pain and not be negative. And then we're going to have Mr. Negative over here with Pierre Poilievre. And I think the challenges for Mr. Poilievre, is that he can't paint himself into a corner as being a shrill, angry voice, because Canadians want to have reasonable solutions. And if you're trying to attract those moderate voters in the suburban ridings, whether it's in Ontario, in BC, or even in Quebec, you have to have reasonable and sensible solutions. And the problem for Trudeau, conversely, is that Pierre Poilievre has a mounting list of grievances and problems that he keeps on citing, whether it's the chaos in the airports, the passport system, immigration backlogs, and increasingly the kind of violent attacks we've just seen in recent weeks in Toronto. So how does Trudeau continue to sound optimistic that better is always possible, and how does, conversely, Mr. Poilievre stop being painted as kind of an angry shill guy who keeps on saying that everything is broken when Canadians ultimately don't want to believe that?
Do you think, Scott, those are the two chief challenges for each of those leaders?
Possibly. I don't like either approach, to be honest. I mean, you listen to Pierre Poilievre, and in addition to the points that were made by Kathleen, I just think, immediately it's kind of a smug, smart aleck sound. It's very like frat boy. Doesn't sound like he's running to be Prime Minister, as he always claims. Sounds like he's running to be president of, Phi Beta Jerka, frat boy. So I think, I think he's got to watch his tone. I really do think it's alienating. When you look at the gender gap that he has, I think in part and parcel, it's the way in which he expresses himself as much as what he says. And for the Prime Minister, I really dislike this repeating, the charge of your opponent. I don't think he should be saying, to Canadians, look, the country isn't broken. I think he should be talking about what's working. That's how to be optimistic. That's how to be solution focused. Obviously, you can't be obtuse. You can't be deaf to people's concerns. But, as an example, this week when they had the cabinet retreat and they took time to come out and said, we're going to update you on passports. The backlog's gone. We're prepared for a massive slush of renewals that's going to occur in July. We've got that covered. That to me is smart. That is the way to counter this message. Not by saying everything isn't broken, we're not broken. Don't give him the credit, and don't put those words in your own mouth, because more people are going to hear them from you than they hear them from the opposition leader.
I also think it's interesting in the sort of jumping off that specific sort of back and forth, Corey, is like the idea that everything is broken and it's the Prime Minister's fault, or nothing is broken and it's nothing of that is my fault either. Like, kind of leaves a lot of Canadians out there who think maybe a bit of both. Like, there's a bit of truth in some of this, but like, is it either or? And where am I left in this sort of political world if I don't believe in either of those?
Yeah, and I think you got to distinguish between things that are broken or that are not working, that are believably in the realm of what a prime minister can change. So things like concerns around the healthcare system, which are very prevalent right now across the board when you look at opinion research. There's a lot of cynicism on the part of Canadians too, that any politician, whether it's a premier or a prime minister, can wave a magic wand and fix all of that. But people do believe, whether it's things like the passports, which it sounds like they're making some progress on, or medicines on pharmacy shelves for a cold or a flu, and not having access to them, that seems like something that should be fixable. And so fix it. Airports as well. I think there's a lot less tolerance for constant delays at Pearson. And then there's another category which is much more intractable. And that's things like the ArriveCAN app and spending, tens of millions of dollars on something that should maybe cost $1 million. And that kind of stuff is much more difficult to go and fix because it requires you to hop in a time machine, and those are in short supply.
And I think, Kathleen, if, for example, we had the federal government or the prime minister who was like, yeah, and in some cases, you know, on the RiveCan, they finally are like, yeah, okay, that stuff is within the things we know you're frustrated by and we need to address them. And also the leader of the opposition who didn't say like everything, you know, like the chicken's expensive because of the prime minister. Like,
yeah.
like if there was a bit of middle ground, like the optimist in me thinks it would be a better political debate, but also I wonder if maybe the strategy behind it is different.
The thing is, I don't think that Pierre Poilievre can resist going to the more inflammatory examples. So he'll come back to the House this week and he'll say things like the McKinsey contracts, too much money, the RiveCan app, too much money. And he's right in that. There has been too much money spent on those things. But does that mean that all of Canada is broken and it's all Justin Trudeau's fault? I don't think that Canadians are going to buy that. I think Canadians actually want compromise. They want cooperation. They want Canada to be more prosperous and for Canadians to do a bit better. But you only do that, frankly, when you can work together and agree on what problem you're trying to solve. But right now it feels to me, and Scott said this, I agree with him, that it's a tonal problem with Pierre Poilievre, that I think that he's painting himself into a corner as kind of being the angry guy and just listing grievance after grievance after grievance without actually presenting any reasonable, sensible solutions that people can buy into. I mean, sure, he's going to cut all the McKinsey contracts. Okay, move on. What next?
Does the opposition, though, Scott, need to provide those solutions? I'm asking from a strategic point of view. I know, like, altruistically, we would all like to see that, but do they, I mean, he does a good job of identifying. I mean, I think people are worried about crime that they're seeing, in the Toronto TTC right now. He does a good job of identifying it. Does he need to provide a solution strategically?
I don't know if he needs to now. He obviously at some point needs to prove that he has answers to complex problems. But what I do think he needs to do at all times is he needs to make certain that his tone, even as his message is hammering away on the Prime Minister, trying to put blame on the Prime Minister, trying to hold the Prime Minister account, that his tone seems reasonable, that he doesn't seem like he's exaggerating. When what you don't want as a political leader, whether the Prime Minister or the opposition leader, is people saying, I don't buy what you're selling. And so when you exaggerate, when you take that step one too far, then you tune people out, and in some cases you provoke a backlash, and I'll just add this from the Prime Minister, the answer is right in front of them. In 2015, they campaigned on a slogan of hope and hard work. They should just reverse it. It should be hard work and hope. That should be the play for them. We're working hard, and if we get our jobs done, and if we keep our heads down and move the pylons here, then there's going to be good reason for hope. And, rather than denying out of hand that there are challenges.
Corey, I'll give you the last word on that.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what's being said, but I think there's another piece that's missing in the Trudeau narrative right now, and is an opportunity for Poilievre, and that's that the government just feels a little bit long in the tooth, a little bit tired. It has an agenda that is not so clear. When a new government comes in, there's some pointed messaging around what it is they're going to do and what their focus is going to be. And I feel like the Trudeau government is suffering from some of the things that the Harper government did in the dying days of that administration, or the Kathleen Wynne government did in the dying days of its time in power. That there just isn't a focus and a purpose that is easily understood by voters. That it's just sort of been lost along the way, and that maybe there's time for a change. And that time for a change element and talking about problems, this is the traditional path that opposition parties and leaders use to find a path into office.
What's old is new again. All right, I'll leave it there. Thanks very much to our Sunday strategy session, Corey, tonight, Kathleen Monk and Scott Reid.